What's up? What's up? What's up, everyone? I'll give you all a chance to file in here. And Avery, yes, it has. We're ready to rock and roll. What's up, everyone? What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Office Hours Live. Here to answer your questions, as always. And specifically today, we're going to be talking about burnout, ways that you can be better dealing with it. It's the end of the year. I know I've gone through a couple waves of it this year, writing a book. Took some time off this summer. Pretty intense the last few months. I'm feeling it, man. I'm kind of going through waves myself, just kind of inching towards the finish line. I've got Thanksgiving for a couple days here, and then a couple weeks off at the end of the year. So yeah, I think for a lot of people, burnout is an important topic. We're going to get to that in a bit. And of course, as always, I'm going to be answering your questions live. I've got some questions that have come through the website that I'll get to as well. And, before we kind of jump in here, I just want to make sure everybody knows that we're talking about burnout. And if you want a way to deal with it, you can go to my website right now and pick up 4 free videos on burnout right at the top of the Tendler.com. Click that link. This is now from the mental game tune-up for tournament poker. Module 4 was about burnout. You can see that here. And yeah, for the next week, you have access to these 4 videos, which include, the 6 ways to prevent burnout, create efficiency with routines. Routines are one of the most primary ways that you can deal with burnout better. And then you've got 2 coaching videos that I did with Diego Ventura and Matt Affleck on this topic. So certainly if you have not gone there and gotten these free videos, there's about an hour and 20 minutes of content. It's kind of a no-brainer in that regard. Now, the other thing is that next week I'm going to be releasing some discounts on the website, both related to the video course as well as my books. So if you're not subscribing to my newsletter, go down to jaredtendler.com, obviously click on this link to get the burnout course, and then scroll down here and make sure you've added yourself to the newsletter so that you'll be among the first to be notified. All right. So let's get into a little bit of stuff about burnout. Here we are. Many of you are poker players, traders, and in my opinion, one of the biggest mistakes that you all make is comparing yourselves to kind of the normal 9-to-5ers, right? You have friends that work a normal job, and you feel like you need to be working 8 hours a day, which means, obviously trading a full day, playing cash game sessions for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, playing tournaments for even longer. And, you have to understand that you're not like them, right? You are paid based on your performance. And that changes the game entirely, right? And it makes poker trading. Obviously, look, if you're an esport athlete, if you're a golfer, right, you're sort of in the traditional competitive landscape. It's a lot easier to understand and see yourself as an athlete. But as poker players and traders, it's harder to kind of view that intuitively. And I think it's important that you do, because the amount of stress that you feel on a day-to-day basis is going to burn you out faster than it will, most people, right? And the normal workforce. Just imagine if in corporate America, right, if you had a bad meeting, didn't land that client, didn't have good ideas in a brainstorming session, you would lose money because of that. Your money would come out of your paycheck because you had a bad day. And that would change, I think, the demands for my services in corporate America significantly. The mental and emotional strain that you'd feel on a day-to-day basis would be way higher, and it would be a lot more commensurate with, what you all feel on a day-to-day basis. Right. So, when I was writing the mental game of trading, the fear that a lot of people kind of felt like was, endemic in trading, to me, really had a lot to do with just the normal nerves that are part of being in an intense competitive environment. And those nerves fray and eventually can cause burnout. So in thinking about how you're going to deal with it, we can begin to think about burnout kind of like a sunburn, right? There are matter or like a burn to the skin, right? There's matters of degree to how burned out you get. And the worse your burnout, the longer it's going to take to recover. So I think what a lot of you all end up kind of feeling is this sort of daily, almost just kind of not malaise, right? There's just this crustiness that you're kind of fighting against on a daily basis, and maybe not even realize, how much it's affecting you. And especially in the last 20 months since COVID, right? We've been at home more. We haven't traveled as much. It's been harder to, be with friends and family. There's more hoops to jump. So there's almost kind of been more strain in our day-to-day lives as well. So it's harder to, just get away and feel like you can get a complete reset. So when you start to think about burnout like this, then we start thinking about prevention, right? I mean, what's the equivalent of putting on suntan lotion here, right? It's kind of your daily maintenance, the way that you are setting up your routines, the way that you're kind of managing yourself, which is, closer to what athletes are doing, right? They're trying to squeeze out as much of their capacity on a day-to-day basis, while kind of getting themselves to the edge of burnout without going over. And of course, you look at what happens during a season long, like the NBA or the NFL, right? Players are always struggling towards the end of those seasons, but come playoff time, right, they have the kind of a natural adrenaline that kicks in that makes it a lot easier. So I'm just going to kind of peel back out for a second. By all means, continue to post your comments in the comment box. I will get to your questions, about burnout, and certainly about anything that's pressing in your mental game, as we continue. So when we look at prevention, right, a lot of it comes down to, those routines and those structures, right? Establishing consistent routines is energy efficient. The more you can save energy, the less you burn, right? And then it's going to be harder for you to burn out. So really kind of look closer at your routines, at the ways that they may actually be stressing your mind. A lot of you stay on the computer longer than you need to be. You're on your phones a lot longer than you need to be. You don't have time to really just let your mind kind of unpack, right? There's so much data consumption, right? That's the mental activity that's equal to, you being on the playing field, just playing, training, working hard all day, and your muscles, of course, fatigue, right? When your mind fatigues like that and you continue to consume more and more, the doom scrolling, checking out Reddit for hours, right? I mean, or continuing to, grind on poker or trading in, I don't want to say ineffective ways, but ways that are going to kind of lead towards burnout, right? There's a balancing act that you can find where you can push yourself, right, but then understand, how to create that proper rest and recovery, which of course is another big key. My standard advice in terms of kind of the bigger rest is that once a month, you take at least 2 consecutive days off. Now, for poker players, this tends to be more applicable than the traders that are only trading, kind of the live markets. But if you're a crypto trader, I mean, it's even harder to create that separation, because if the markets are open 24/7, and I know there are other markets that, don't kind of follow the major, major markets in both the US and abroad. So point being, right, 2 days off in a row, once a month, 5 days off, 1 full week off per quarter. You look at how much time you're taking off on a quarterly basis, it's probably not that, right? And I'm not saying it has to be that way, but if you're going to talk about sustaining yourself throughout the year and look at the overall, kind of ROI for the output that you're putting in, how costly is it really to take that time off? I think it's sometimes in our minds, we think, oh, I can't take that time off, I need to be there. But if you're underperforming by even just a couple percent on a day-to-day basis, right, that you kind of make up for those days that you missed, and certainly it could even be much more significant than that, right? Especially if you're making some big significant mistakes, because when you're burned out, what are the costs, right? The costs are, you're going to make more mistakes, right? Sometimes just basic mistakes, or they're going to be bigger mistakes. you're going to be more emotionally volatile, right? Your mind, the part of your brain responsible for the emotional control, right, is just weakened. So you're just going to make a lot more mistakes. You're going to be, it's going to be harder for you to focus. Motivation is going to wane to do the extra work around both studying pre-market routines, tournament routines, and then of course, the work afterwards. So the costs in my mind are pretty high, and the benefit in being able to create that kind of rest on a quarterly, monthly basis is really essential. And then we can look for ways on a daily basis to do that as well. Taking breaks on a regular basis. I'm not saying they need to be done every hour, every 2 hours, but a lot of you end up kind of just glued to your screens, glued to the game, and don't really take a few minutes to recover. A lot of times you kind of plow yourself down into a spot where you get so tired, whether it's playing or even studying, that it then takes kind of an exponential amount of time to recover, right? It's almost like this sort of exponential curve, right? As you become burned out, it takes you it takes you an exponential amount longer to recover, because you're tapping into your adrenaline stores, and recovery of that is harder than recognizing it early and being able to recover fast. Okay, so I'm going to get to some of your questions. Once again, right, go to the website, grab the free module. I think it's super fascinating to have had the conversations I did with Matt and Diego. They both have been seasoned pros playing. I think Matt's been playing for 13 years. Diego's playing for close to that. These guys have very, very efficient routines in general, but you want to push yourself hard. Right? That's how you can be at your best the longest, is pushing yourself for greatness, and that means you are going to burn out. And I think their perspectives were quite fascinating. All right, so I can see questions coming in here. I'm going to get to those in a minute. First, we're going to start out with some of the questions that had come into the website before. Oh, I got to turn this sucker off because I'm not going to blind you guys with this thing as we're rolling on here. Okay, so first question, two-parter. I feel the most burned out doing countless hours of backtesting my strategy for trading. Is there anything I can do to overcome this feeling? Understanding backtesting is completely vital for both my psychological and technical analysis, Martha. Yeah, so again, whenever we're dealing with really kind of any mental game issue, a good diagnosis of the problem is always key. So the question that I first have is like, well, what is it? Why do you feel burned out during those countless hours? I mean, I understand that there's a lot of work involved. And so it makes me think that maybe there's a motivational component to it, right? Anytime that we don't like what we're doing, it's going to create more emotional strain than when we like what we're doing, right? When you're passionate and really enjoying it, right, there's less kind of mental drain as a result of it. And sometimes it can be the opposite, in that when you're excited and kind of really passionate about it, it actually feeds you in a way. So I'm not saying that backtesting is going to be the most exciting part of your day-to-day job, right, as a trader. But can you find ways to love it more? Can you find ways to be curious and passionate about it in a way that is going to reduce some of that strain? The other thing is, I kind of mentioned this before, taking more frequent breaks, right? Giving your mind a chance to just kind of stop absorbing more information, right? Like a sponge just soaking up more and more water, right? And then you just sort of reach your saturation point. And at that point, you're, at least in terms of your input, right, how much you're consuming, you're just not really doing much at all, right? Certainly you could be running simulations and checking things, but in terms of the internalization of it, it's going to reduce significantly. So take breaks on a regular basis to squeeze some of that water out, which would include doing some writing, right? Write down some of the things that you're thinking about as you're doing that backtesting, right? Or that you're curious about. If you have questions, don't just keep all of this content in your mind. Find a way to interact with the material a little bit more. It can, again, kind of make it easier to be passionate, enjoy it, A, but B, it squeezes out a little bit of that data out of your mind and makes it a bit easier for you to make sense of it. All right. Now, I assume there's some questions here about burnout, so I'm going to come back to these here. Shelly, I think this is such an important topic, especially for those of us that do this full time and it's our living. I'm always better after a break, but it doesn't make it easier to take one. Yes, this is it in a nutshell. You don't have enough logic ahead of time to take the break. You feel like you must. You're compelled. Why? Because maybe your friends are not trading and they don't take as much time off as you need. And why they don't need to, right? Because they have, an hour break at lunch. They have meetings where they can sit kind of passively and pay attention ish. And, if they don't really understand what happened, it doesn't really matter, right? Maybe they make a couple points. So, how much high level output do they have in an 8-hour window? Whereas for you, how much high level output do you have on a day-to-day basis? I mean, if you're taking this very seriously, as many of my clients do, we're talking 1, maybe 2 hours of prep work before. We're talking about maybe, a 6 to 8 hour trading session. Maybe only trade the mornings or the afternoons, or morning and then part of the afternoon, whatever. But let's just say it's another, 4 hours. And then, you're doing some analysis afterwards. So you're talking between 6 to 10 hours per day of high level mental output. So do you, quote, deserve time off? Hell yeah, you do. But it's not even about deserving it. It's what does it take for you to be at your best? And how much money do you make as a result of taking that time off? It feels like it costs you money. But that's the myth. That's the flaw in the logic. And you can run some numbers and just get an estimate. I mean, I'm not saying you can get perfect numbers here, but yeah, run an estimate. How much money do you get paid for taking time off? Because it's real. All right. MH, howdy. Welcome. All right. Guillaume, I feel like we are raised and educated to be at the top all the time. As a result, we refuse to see our weaknesses, negative emotions, and then one day you're in front of your screens and nothing works. It's an interesting perspective. Yeah, I mean, I think, for it to just disappear, that quickly, go back to my concept of inchworm, right? It's probably just perception, right? Your C game, still rests on a foundation of competency and knowledge, right? So that can't disappear, but, it probably feels a lot weaker than what you expect. And, but the education to be at the top all the time, right? That creates a mental strain too. And I think, a lot of my clients, and certainly readers of both poker and trading books, have felt that relief when they understand that range is reality, right? And if you want to, those of you who don't know inchworm that well, go to the office hours. I think it was office hours 3 that was about inchworm, right? But when you can really embrace the idea that you have a range, you've got an A game, you've got a B game, you've got a C game. That C game and those weaknesses are a reality. They're just a functional part of your own competency. So you don't have to pretend that you're perfect. You don't have to be at your best all the time, because it's impossible. Okay. Say that one more time. It is impossible to be at your best all the time, because your best is a moving target, right? Your A game should continue to elevate, and you can't chase a moving target like that. You can't continually hit your an ever evolving best. Okay. So there are going to be times where you slip up. Now, I think what a lot of people don't like is when they slip up so much and you go back to that really weak C game that you expect not to be there anymore. Totally reasonable. But there's a lot of pressure released when it's okay to have that slippage, right? Because it's going to happen at times. We don't have full control or command of it. But you can have a very, very high level of diligence around understanding why that slippage occurs, what's going on there, what are the mistakes that you're making, why are you making them, what's going on emotionally, mentally, right, situationally, and then work the system, work the problem, come up with a solution, and then figure out ways to systematically improve it. Right? It's not kind of rocket science in that regard. All right, I see more questions coming in here. Love to see. I'm going to come back to some of the ones sent in here. This one comes in from Tim. Fear of failure and pulling the trigger are the most difficult aspects of trading for me. How do I overcome them? Those of you who heard me say this before, right? We're not going to use the word overcome, because it implies that you're actually not solving the problem. The problem needs to be understood and needs to be analyzed so that you can actually solve it, right? Overcoming it has a connotation of just being temporary, right? So the fear of failure can come from a lot of different things, right? One is just our interpretation of what failure means. For some of you, and I should say to this question, the fear of pulling the trigger is a symptom of the fear of failure. Now, it could be a symptom of other fears as well, fear of mistakes, fear of losing. But in this case, we'll just assume that it's just the fear of failure that you're struggling with. So if you correct the fear of failure, then you should correct the fear of pulling the trigger. So some people fear failure because failure feels permanent. Okay, there's an ethos and there's an ethic out there. There's a perspective out there that, really kind of unconsciously for a lot of you, some of it consciously, but that believes that if you were to fail, that means that either you are a failure, which makes it kind of more of a confidence character type thing, or that if you were to fail, that your failure would be permanent, right? You have obviously an aspiration to be a successful trader. And so at what point do you define the failing, right? I think a lot of times this failure is not really determined, right? You don't say, okay, I'm giving myself, a year, 18 months, whatever. And if I don't, then I'm quote failed and I'm not going to do it anymore. I mean, really failure for a lot of you is like really only truly going to happen once you stop trying. And I've worked with a number of clients who have actually failed and they've had to get a real job, whether they were poker players or traders. They had to get a real job. They couldn't do it, but there were reasons for it, right? The failure happens for predictable reasons, right? Your system sucks, or there's emotional things that are getting in the way. Either way, you have to solve for that stuff. And, it can be solved for while you're going, while you have a normal job. And that's what, these traders and poker players did, right? They solve for the emotional stuff, taking themselves kind of off the hot seat. So what is the failure? Does failure feel permanent? What does it represent? Is it connected to your confidence? Do you feel like a failure? And some of you are, and maybe Tim, for this true for you, is maybe some of you are actually feeling like you got to make up for past failures, right? You see trading, poker, other things as your way to prove that you're not a failure, right? Or to reconcile or repair the failures that you've had in the past or the lack of success that you've had in the past. Now is your time. And so it puts a lot of pressure on you. And so if you can actually reconcile the past failures and see them as building blocks for where you're at today, then it doesn't feel like, success or failure is going to define you and make up for the past. You kind of can already kind of make up for the past and use it as a stepping stone for the future. Okay, here's an esports question. Do you think that improving my mental game will give me a massive edge over most of the players esports in my region, North America? Yes. Now, that's not to say that there's a lot of mental game fish, a lot of weak mental players in esports, but on average, the standard is still pretty low. Nikos, how do I handle the emotional buildup after several red days? Nikos, I saw you were in the chat, so here we go. And actually, I should say too, there's a couple questions about this emotional buildup, or what I call accumulated emotion. A couple questions on this, and it relates to burnout, right? You can burn out faster when you're carrying more emotional weight on a day-to-day basis. So you need to create a process to deal with that emotion on a day-to-day basis. Otherwise, right, not only does it affect your performance, as Nikos is describing, but it also makes it easier for you to burn out, which is, a big part of what we're trying to do here today, right? Reduce the burnout. Give yourself a chance to finish the year strong and do better next year as well. So daily emotional buildup. What do you do at the end of the day? What you do at the end of the day matters. And it's not only negativity. It's not only the fear, the anger, right, that builds up. It's also the overconfidence. Had a number of clients, both poker players and traders in the last few months, which is cool, that they've been doing really well. And what happens, right? They go to bed on a high note. They go to, they finish the weekend on a high note, or, win a big tournament on a Sunday. And the after hours, the after the tournament, the after the session emotion just keeps building. They're just so excited by it. And of course, then that bleeds into the following days, leading to higher expectations, leading to just fatigue because their mind was so active a little bit of separation from what they actually need to be doing. So it's not just positive emotion that can build up. It's not just negative emotion that builds up. It's also positive ones. So you have to deal with that emotion directly. And if I were to say what is optimal is to take some time at the end of every day, build up or not, to write about what emotions were present during the day. Now, on a day where there was a significant amount, you obviously are going to write more. At the end of writing that out, you're going to use that, kind of diatribe, whatever that brain dump was, as step one of the mental hand history. Now, of course, you can go back and read through it and summarize or simplify what you wrote to make it easier. But you are either then going to complete the remaining 4 steps of the mental hand history, or if it's too late in the day, you're too tired, you need a break, you come back and do it again later. It could be later in the day, or if it's really late, do it tomorrow. But the point is, right, that you need to kind of get the emotions out. And a lot of times people are just venting. The venting to other people, I think, falls short, because a lot of times it feels like when you vent that the emotion is just released, or you feel like you've kind of handed it off to a friend and said, it's kind of your responsibility now to tell me what to do. Or there's like a kind of an implied responsibility that's being handed off. And so the emotion doesn't really go anywhere, right? The release of the emotion is not what we're just after, right? You take a glass of water, you stick it under a leaky faucet, it's going to fill back up. You dump some water out, you stick it back under. What's going to happen? Over time, we want to fix the problems that are causing the emotional buildup in the first place. Okay. So dump out some of the water, right? Doing the writing, and then work the problem. And you keep doing that day after day. And what's going to happen, right? Eventually, you're going to get closer and closer to actually cracking through to understanding the roots of the flaw. And then you can create injecting logic statements that you can use during the next trading day, during the next poker session, to minimize the accumulation of emotion, right? So you prevent the emotion from building up by having a good correction. But to get to that point, you got to productively vent on paper so you can look at it, be fully responsible for it, and take the responsibility to break it down. All right. I'm going to come back to some of your questions here. And again, I'm just going to say one more time, go to the website, get the free Burnout module. Actually, I'm going to say one other thing too. So for the last couple weeks, I've been doing a trading industry survey. If those of you are traders, don't mind taking 3 minutes to complete this trading industry survey. It's going to go a long way for me to better understand what I can help you better with next. Okay. So please take a few minutes to fill that out. And again, go pick up the Burnout course. I mean, there's literally no reason for you not to. It's 80 minutes. You got 1 week to watch all of it. Go. Okay. Next question. MH, while making an effort to bring into consciousness and catalog in real time the difference between intuition, high-level decisions, and simple trading ideas, I feel I'm hesitating more. It feels like I'm having a bit of trouble trying to make it conscious, slower decisions. Can I expect my brain to figure it out and make a conscious decision faster? Any advice on this issue? So let me just make sure I understand. Make an effort to bring in a conscious account. Yes. Okay. So yes, anytime that you are closely examining your decision-making process, you are having to kind of slow down, right? Before it was just going by very quickly, right? Now you're actually slowing it down to see what's going on in real time, or injecting pieces of it that weren't there that you want to be there. So yes, it should slow down in the short term, but you can speed it up, right? You can go back and look at, I'm assuming you're a trader, but you can go back and almost do like a market replay, live market, try to make decisions, right? Faster, almost like just kind of practicing making decisions. You can write out your complete decision-making process and practice going through it faster, right? Test yourself almost as if it was like a job interview. Like, you got 10 seconds, tell me how you make decisions, go. So, as you talk about it, you're going to see where the holes are, right? You'll get 80% of it. Where is the 20% that's still weak? That gives you an indication as to what what's missing. All right, back to questions about burnout. Do you think 5 days off every quarter is still needed if you only play Monday to Friday and always take the weekend off? Yes, I do. I think a weekend off is great. I would imagine, right, that you're feeling pretty good, Monday, Tuesday, and if you're feeling a little crusty by Friday, right? It's just there's like a buildup, right, over time, and I think so it's my bias. Okay, 100% my bias is I want you all to be at your best more often, and so to do that, you need more time to be able to kind of decompress and let the knowledge that you've been consuming settle in, right? When we rely on momentum for our own progress, right, sometimes that back end is a little bit slower to solidify and consolidate. And if you've come back from a week off and there's no rust, right, you come back and you're like, whew, mind is clear, you're super sharp, right? That's evidence of that consolidation occurring because you've taken yourself kind of off the hot seat. And it just makes it, I think, create like a longer term cycle, right? Because if you look at, what professional athletes do, right? They take months off during their off season, right? I've got some PGA Tour players, right? Guys playing this week, then they got 6 weeks off till January. They go to Hawaii, right? 6-7 weeks off, right? So you all don't do that. I mean, a lot of the tournament players that I've worked with recently, they're creating cycles now where they're trying to peak for the big tournaments of the year, right? The World Series, the big, tournament series online, W Coupe, Scoop, et cetera. Like, they're trying to create cycles, but cash game players can do the same thing and traders can do the same thing as well, right? You create cycles throughout the year because you're trying to push yourself higher and higher, and you need that back end to continue to support that growth. Otherwise, if that gap between, right, your best and your worst gets too wide, right, it becomes a little bit more volatile. It actually leads to burnout faster, right? Because you're burning more emotional energy to be at your best. So yes, that to me is optimal. But you might consider, looking at it more cyclically, where maybe you take a month off. So then, no, you don't need to take off one every quarter. But I just understand that maybe you take, 4 days off once a quarter, something like that. Coaching the Pros videos are great. Here they are. Diego, Matt, thank you, man. Glad you enjoyed them. All right, John. Hey, Jared, the topic is more needed than you can possibly imagine. I'm a poker playing teacher, and the burnout is real in both. I can imagine. Those are two intense jobs, especially in a pandemic environment where teaching has been in, I hearken to imagine that there's been harder times to be a teacher than the last year and a half. And I assume that. So thanks. Okay. Hello. I thought it should be in 1 hour. Have to speed up to be up to date. Yeah. So there was a time change in the US. The UTC thing gets a little funky. So I don't know. Actually, we went back an hour. So I don't know. Whatever. Yes. Well, welcome. Glad you're here, though. Franco. Hey, Jared. Great to see you live. Thanks for your work. Has helped me a lot. Amazing. Super happy to hear that. All right. Let's come back to some of these pre-sent questions. All right. This one. I have lost hundreds of thousands over the past 15 years. Although I have a good strategy now and I'm making money consistently, I feel anxious whenever I trade and am patient to make up for that huge loss. What can I tell myself to let go of the urgency to make up for that past loss? Also, I'm now trading super small shares, so it's taking a long time to put a dent in that huge loss. So several clients have come to me with issues similar to this. What I'm going to suggest to you is not easy, but you got to forgive yourself for the big loss. Almost create it as if it's like an entirely different game that you were playing, which was probably gambling. I mean, I'm assuming you didn't have an edge. You didn't really have much of a system. You maybe thought you did. Maybe there was a lot of overconfidence. There's a lot of reasons for why that huge loss occurred, right? We can kind of describe it as something functionally different as what you have now. So now you're actually a trader that has an edge, right? You're playing a different game. And so for some of the traders, poker players that I've worked with that have made, some big mistakes in the past that have been tough to overcome, or even things that were tough to overcome in their professional performance lives beforehand, right? Players that maybe made some big mistakes in other sports that led them to not have professional aspirations there. Anyway, point being, we've all been there, done things in the past that we regret, big or small. The better you can forgive yourself for it, A. B, maybe you can forgive yourself because you can understand why it occurred, what you learned from it, and how those lessons have been carried forward. Right? I talk about one of the traders in the trading book, right? Chris, I think it was in the confidence chapter, where, for him, he made some decisions that didn't cost him money like it did for you, but he missed out on, multiple six-figure type payday. But he viewed, right, that as a huge driver to become the trader that he was at that time. And so just being able to kind of see how they fit together, see how those past failures actually became the foundation, the building blocks for where he was now, made it feel like it actually made sense, right? I mean, so that's one. Another would be maybe do a mental hand history here to see what biases or flaws were evident back then that actually could still be problematic today. If overconfidence is a smaller problem for you now, but was part of the issue back then, dig into the past, dig into the present, and deal with the overconfidence, right? It's easier to forgive a past mistake when you've actually firmly learned from it and been able to actually take the lessons forward and make yourself better. All right, we got just a couple more questions, so we'll get through these, and then I'll come back to your questions now. All right, on a clear day, I have a very good feel for the market, but I generally don't trust my signals because they are intuitive and so difficult to trust. This causes frustration to build up. Then one day, suddenly, the clear days are gone. I'm impatient, frustrated, and generally emotionally unstable. Yeah. Oh, maybe it's the same one that's here. If it's you, then here. So what I would suggest for you is go to the website. Actually, we'll go here. Go to resources, free intuition ebook. Make it your best friend, my friend. Just stick your email address in here. Yeah, I mean, like, you've got to be able to really understand why you're not trusting your signals, right? The frustration that is building up is a consequence of you having ideas about what trades to make that you're just completely ignoring. And so that's the problem you got to solve, right? I mean, the accumulation of the frustration, the accumulation, right, of this impatience, right, or the creation of the impatience is a consequence of not being able to trust your intuition. So just put a big spotlight on that. I think the ebook will help. Let me see if that is you here. No response. Okay, no worries. Okay, one last question here. This comes from a Learn WPT student, Chris. How to adjust to variance? Well, I don't know if adjust is the right word. Maybe deal with variance. I mean, I think, you don't really want to adjust to variance. That would sort of, in my mind, imply that you're changing your strategy to mold around something that you can't control. Your job really is to understand variance, understand how it emerges in the game more clearly. If you can do that, it becomes easier to recognize, right, the differences between your skill and your opponent's skill, right? That's really what you're after. If you're losing, you want to know it's because of your mistakes or because you're getting outplayed, right? Variance is the real kind of factor here that makes the game what it is, which is a beautiful thing. So how do you not adjust to variance? You create an A to C game analysis. So once again, come down to resources, go to worksheets, right? Scroll down here. All right, look at that. All right, well, trading A to C game analysis. Got to throw a poker one in there. What am I doing here? But the reality is that this sucker, I mean, same format, just different details, right? So what you're trying to do is very clearly articulate your A game, your B game, and your C game, from a mental standpoint and a tactical standpoint. And you can go back to the office hours on Inchworm because I talk about the A to C game analysis there as well. But the basic premise is that if you're able to more clearly evaluate how you played, then it becomes a lot easier to evaluate where variance is and perhaps where your opponents are playing well. All right. Okay. So Valentin says, hey, Jared, just started your book and absolutely love it. Awesome. Happy to hear that. Quick question regarding decision-making fatigue. Waking up at 5 for a 9:30 market open to study. Understanding some tasks drain you more than others. Any recommendations on how to use the time most effectively without getting drained for the trading session, backtesting, mental game review? I mean, I kind of would wonder like how much you can do maybe at the end of the trading day, because 4.5 hours is a lot of time to be burning before the market open. And if you're trading a full day, then that's a lot. If you're just trading the first couple hours, then that's different. But what I would look at is, again, some of the things that I pointed to earlier in office hours is, right, build in some breaks, build in some times to take some notes down. And when I say breaks, I mean like the do nothing breaks, closing your eyes for a few minutes, going for a walk, getting some fresh air, having some food, drinking some water, having a cup of coffee, right? Things that are going to actually give your mind a chance to kind of unwind a little bit. Because a lot of times, I didn't mention this earlier, right? The innovation, right? The creativity, the putting pieces together, right? Oftentimes happens when we just let ourselves, let our minds relax, right? There's a great book on my shelf. You can't really see it there-ish. It's the yellow one right below the mug. That's the book Deep Focus. And Cal Newport does a great job of just describing what people who have engaged in highly concentrated, kind of mental activities are doing. Now they're not in performance activities, so it's not like a perfect parallel. But my point is that, he describes the necessity to be bored, and that boredom is not, a problem. I think we oftentimes view boredom as a problem, but for many of you, you need that time for your mind to actually process what you've been consuming. So if you're doing that much backtesting, right, take 10, 15, 20 minutes. You might see that your warm-up actually becomes more efficient by having those breaks. So, a lot of times with my clients, I often kind of frame it like as an experiment. Like, let's do a test. Try this for a week and see what happens. Okay, so for you, maybe so you wake up at 5. So let's assume you get to the computer 5:15, 5:20, 5:30. After an hour, after 45 minutes, experiment with a 20-minute break. And then every hour until the market opened, experiment with a 20-minute break. And on that break, do some writing about what you had just been working on, just kind of a couple quick notes, 10, 15 minutes, just total break, decompression, and then come back, reread your notes, and then get back to the work. Now, I realize that we're taking out maybe like an hour of that time, but you can see what's the result, right? Do you actually feel clearer, going into the session, or maybe not? But I wouldn't do it for one day. One day is not usually enough time to get a good test. Captain Axelrod, good friend here, weekly or monthly, I should say. After my burnout, I took a break. I feel very relaxed and blissed. How do I get into gear again, slowly or in straight? Excellent question. So I'm glad that you're, in a good spot here now. Now, this doesn't help you now, but I would say in the future, before you take those bigger breaks, write down a bunch of notes, right? Things that you were thinking about, things that you had been working on. Look at your A to C game analysis to see sort of where you ranked, and other things that maybe ideas of things you wanted to work on with your game. And then that becomes kind of the cheat sheet to kind of get you started. So since you don't have that, you could create it, right? You could spend some time thinking about almost like kind of project planning out the sort of next phase or next cycle before your next break. What do you want to accomplish in this period, right? So, one of the things, that I talk about in not just this burnout module, but in the video course as a whole, is this creation of cycles to work on your game. So tournament players are a little bit easier. Cash game players can do this as well. And obviously traders can too. You just start to break up your year into chunks, right? Maybe quarterly, kind of the easy way to look at it. And so if you're taking a break every quarter, then every quarter you should be setting goals as to what you're accomplishing. So that's something you can do right now from a tactical basis. Like, what do you want in the next 3 months to accomplish? Come, what are we looking at? Let's just say end of February. What do you want? Where do you want your game to be at that point? Right? Articulate down that mentally. Same thing as well, right? And that can be a way to give. Another one is you just do kind of a cold test, right? So sometimes you come back from a break and you want to see if there's been any improvement to your C game. You have that opportunity, right? So you're very, very relaxed, right? You're a little bit lower on that performance stress curve, which means it ought to be a little bit harder for you to play well, maybe a little bit rusty. But if you go and play or trade, I forget where you're at, man. Is it like how much of your C game is now kind of solidified in a way that's quite a lot easier? It's kind of fun sometimes to get that kind of cold test to see where you're actually at right now, and coming back from a break can do that. All right, holy moly, we got a lot of questions left, and we're gonna enter the lightning round a little bit earlier than normal. Okay, Matt, what are recommended strategy for those of us who have unfortunately missed the early signs and have hit the proverbial wall? Rest. I mean, there's just no other way around it. And if there if you're in a spot where you can't rest, then try to scale down what you're doing to a minimum. Do an A to C game analysis so that you have very, very strong kind of clarity on what your C game is, and you do everything you can on a day-to-day basis to avoid it. And if you can't, right, then you can continue to understand like what's causing it, right? Because even if it's an emotional issue, right, we know that frustration is building more often. It's still building because the leaky faucet, right? So what's the leak, right? Examine the underlying flaws that are causing that frustration that's then leading to those mistakes. That sometimes is easier to do at a time when you're burned out because the problem gets bigger. All right. Jared, you mentioned that our daily routines can help us maintain a stronger level of performance. Can you give some examples of daily routines to help our mind stay in shape versus things we can do on off days to help recharge? Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking how you're preparing before poker or trading. We're talking about what you do during those sessions. We're talking about what you do afterwards, and then what you do kind of in your personal time. All of those points have opportunities to become more efficient. So again, I talk about it in these videos, right? It's right here, creating efficiency with routine. So there's more details there. But the point is, right, you can look and examine at any one of those points and look for better ways to do it. But the overall thesis is that the more your routines become routine, not the elements, not the details of it day to day, right? Like what you're preparing is going to change, right? Because your mental game evolves, your tactical thing, there's evolution to it. But the procedures, right? The processes that you go through, you want to become more systematic and more routined, because then actually you don't have to think about what to do. You just do it. And that actually saves energy. When taking a rest, how relaxed should you be? Should you be somewhat relaxed during rest or extremely relaxed? Because there's a risk of being asleep. Should rest be consumed systematically or when you feel fatigued? So, I think the thing about like how relaxed you should be is pretty variable. I have clients who are they need to be active at all times. And so for them, they can go and have fun with friends. They can go play golf. They can go do things that are still active, not relaxing, but they're not mentally draining, right? So athletes, to continue to be physically active doesn't make sense, right? When they're resting, they can be mentally stimulated. For you all, it's kind of the opposite. Nikos, makes total sense. Also, too much positive emotional buildup can lead to disasters. So if you remember Nikos' question around how to deal with the emotional accumulation day to day. Okay. Yes, so this is a question back to the survey. So PBJ, you did through Traders Army. Yes, thank you very much. And Welcome to a Trader's Army follower here. Good stuff. Is this the survey that you emailed directly? Yes, it is. Ahmed, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Did you also say take 2 full days off every month? Yes, I did. So, minimum kind of 1 day off a week, 2 full days off a month, 5 days off once a quarter. We'll call it the 1, 2, 5, whatever. Okay. David, doing my mental game profiles, I realize I have a lot of different mental game flaws that sometimes overlap in different profiles. Is this common, or should I choose one profile for each flaw? No, man, it's tough. Yeah, the complexity is pretty common. I mean, that's usually what happens with clients that show up on my doorstep, right? There is that complexity that's harder to kind of fit into neat buckets. To be honest, in my head, I see my system as being in 3 dimensions. And so, you look at the book and the book is laid out in a linear fashion, but you can see, right? Like high expectations as an example, right? Some flaw I talk about in greed and in fear and in tilt and in confidence. And it's so how that one flaw then creates all of those different issues is very common. But then you've got, you like different flaws that are, for example, sometimes traders will, being overconfident is the first problem that emerges. Mistakes are then made, then it turns into revenge. So we talk about a confidence profile or a tilt profile. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you're doing the work in the way that you've described, you've got better clarity as to what is happening in real time. The profile is really designed to just help you to train your mind to see that in real time. And then you've got the injecting logic, the strategic reminder, you've got the real-time process to crack through that in the moment. If you have that, right, that's really what we're after. We're not after perfection in these profiles being kind of neat and clean. So, but good work to get to that point. All right, Yuri, if you made mistakes in the past and lost money, take it as tuition. We pay a lot for universities, same with trading. You have to pay to learn in trading. So yeah, when we're dealing with past mistakes and failures, that's good advice as well. All right. Nolan, tuition ebook is pure gold. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Here it is here. All right. As an esports player, how do you improve your C game? Like, how did Elige get his C game that strong? What are the main steps to improve it? Well, Elige, like a lot of athletes, esports or other, are maniacal about their weaknesses. So the first thing is you got to define what it is. That A to C game analysis, you don't have to go through and defining B and C game. You can just focus on your C game. And if it's tough for you to know what that is, right? Like sometimes it is difficult to identify it. I mean, I think one of the things I tried very hard with the trading book is to help traders to realize problems that they were struggling with in ways that they didn't know. So, you can pick up that book or the poker book. I know a lot of esports athletes have picked up both. Sometimes it can kind of just get your mind thinking about all the different emotions that might be affecting you in subtle ways. Even though they're described for different industries, they can still apply for you. So that's one option. But then from a strategic standpoint, if you don't know where your weaknesses are, if you have some friends, better players, people that you can maybe hire, a coach, find a way to get those weaknesses exposed. But then once you identify them, now you got to know how to correct them. And a lot of C game weaknesses, and this was true with Elige to a degree, right? Had some emotional component to it, right? I'm not going to go into the specifics for him and what those were. But the point is, right, you sometimes have to deal with the emotional component for what's forcing those tactical or strategic mistakes, sometimes even mechanical mistakes. But the main idea, though, is that on a daily basis, you're aware of what they are and you're prepared to correct them, because in real time, that's when you have the most power to be able to correct your C game. That you have to be able to do that. If you don't, you just keep getting your C game stronger and stronger. So you must be prepared to correct your C game every single day. And if you go through a streak where you're doing really, really well, guess what? You still have a mother effing C game. So you got to be prepared to deal with it. All right. Yuri's back. To understand variance, you need to see the big picture. Okay, so these are some quotes here. Enjoy doing nothing, I was once told. Yeah, enjoy doing nothing. I've actually loved watching Seinfeld again. So speaking of doing nothing, a whole show about it. What could be better? I actually forgot how many episodes are just pure gold. I sometimes remember just the really amazing ones, like the A+ episodes, but even the other ones are just they're just funny as hell. Anyway, Valentin, much appreciated. Great stuff. We'll experiment with the 10 to 20 minute brain breaks. Cool. Love it. Love the idea of a brain break. That's a nice term. Like it. Sorry you're late. No apologies. There's going to be a replay. So yeah, nothing to worry about. One day off a week. Seriously. No, I don't mean, I mean like on the weekends. Like I'm not saying, you can trade 5 days a week. Okay. But weekends, right? You're not back testing. Listen, I have traders who they're working every weekend, 6 to 8 hours, right? That's so they need to take a day off. So no, I'm not saying you need to take a trading day off. I'm saying you got to take a day off on a weekend. All right. After I saw Matt's video, it made me think of how I do my analysis, like chess plays. Have you seen the Queen's Gambit? Heck yeah. Quite an amazing series. It's been a while now. I feel like I've watched too many other things to remember all the details, but I remember loving it. And no, it didn't make me want to become a chess player because I know how good they are too. So, okay. Lightning round's over. Questions are done. Look at that. Actually finished early for once. So just a couple reminders here, everybody. So we've got office hours number 7. Might just say number 7. Am I right there? Office hours number 7 is going to be. Get rid of these guys. Office hours 7 is going to be December 15th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 20:30. That can't be right. 20:30 UTC? Nope, that's a mistake. 4 hours ahead. 18:30 UTC. 4 hours ahead this time of year. 20:30 p.m. Eastern time. And the topic is going to be on recognizing your wins. So in years past, I've kind of started goal setting in December, but most of y'all don't want to do that. You don't want to do it until January. Now, I start my goal setting in November. I begin thinking about what I've accomplished this year and what I want to do the following year. I'm not saying that that's optimal. I'm just saying that for next office hours, we're going to be talking about recognizing your wins and really thinking about what you accomplished this year, because it does help to set up your understanding about what you can do the following year, right? The old adage of people underestimate what they can do. So that people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10. So if you can get better at setting goals year over year, right, then there's efficiencies in that. There's productivity in that. There's less mental and emotional strain on that as you're trying to do what you want to do, and you're probably going to accomplish more. And being able to do that well means looking back and saying, okay, what were my assumptions and goals at the beginning of the year? Where am I at now? What were my wins? And I think the other big part of this too is it is important to recognize our wins, because so often we focus too much on our own failures, our own mistakes, and there needs to be equal weight given to them. So I'm not going to go too much into it now. Let's see if there's any other questions that are pouring in here. Nope, just some good thank yous. So Nikos, you're welcome. And Jeff, you're welcome as well. Thank you all for being here. Yeah, one last reminder, right? Intuition ebook still available. Module 4 of the mental game tune-up for tournament poker, available for the next week. Okay, so go to the website, download both, and get at it. Wish you all well. Have a great month, and I'll see you next time for office hours.